you for joining us for There is Power in a Union for Professionals. My name is Ethan Miller, and together with my colleague Katie, we're going to be reviewing what a union is, what kinds of professionals are joining unions, why people organize, and how you can start forming a union with your coworkers. We are recording this workshop to share with people who registered and couldn't make it, and to share online with others. But we are going to stop recording before our Q&A at the end, just so everyone knows. So we're just going to get started with a little bit of introductions. So again, my name is Ethan Miller. I'm the Research and Outreach Manager for DPE, the Department for Professional Employees, and I use he, him pronouns. Over the last 10 years, I've served in a variety of roles in the labor movement, and I've worked to help professionals in a variety of occupations organize new unions, including college and university faculty, nonprofit researchers and advocates, as well as programmers and product managers in tech. And I'm excited to talk to you all today about the ways that you can take an active role in improving your job.
And I'm Katie Barrows, the Communications Director for DPE, and I use she, her pronouns. While I don't have as long of a history in the labor movement as Ethan, I've worked with many folks to organize around different campaigns and causes, including nonprofit employees, vet techs, and many other professionals to organize for better workplaces. And today I hope to help you get started to improve your own workplace. As Ethan and I have mentioned, we work together for the Department for Professional Employees, AFL-CIO, also known as DPE. DPE is a coalition of 24 national unions that represent millions of professionals across the country. We work together to grow the labor movement by supporting our affiliated unions as they help professionals organize and organize in the new unions and win important workplace changes.
So, you might have joined this webinar or this workshop to answer the question, what is a union? Well, at its most basic level, a union is a group of employees in a given workplace who come together in order to negotiate with their employer and improve pay, benefits, and working conditions.
Unions are essential to expanding democracy in the workplace. With a seat at the table with your employer, union professionals have a significant say in the way their jobs and workplaces operate. Unions also provide all employees, regardless of seniority, with a voice in important workplace conversations. Unions are also democratic structures themselves, and this starts with the process of organizing and continues as you elect a team of your coworkers to represent you in contract negotiations, and then vote on that proposed contract and participate in elections for union leadership positions.
So in just a second, I'm going to ask everyone to take a minute and participate in a poll that's going to be appearing on your screen right now. And the question that we're asking you is that when you think about professionals who have organized new unions in the last year, which of the following groups comes to mind? You can check off the box for as many options as you think might be right. You can check off no boxes. We're just looking to gauge a little bit about what you think about who comes to mind when you think about professionals who have organized unions. So I'll give that just 1 second. Okay, so I am going to give you one second, get your last votes in. I'm going to end our poll and put the results up of what everyone was thinking. So a good mix. People sort of were thinking about a lot of different options here. And the right answer is all of the above. Professionals in nearly every occupation and industry have been organizing new unions over the past few years. And nationwide, there are 6.3 million professionals who are union members, like I said, in virtually every occupation and industry.
And just to add on to that, obviously there are a lot of other occupations that we didn't list off, such as veterinary professionals. But I'm going to go into some examples of recent organizing successes among different professionals. First, program and tech workers at the Google contractor HCL America in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, organized in 2019 with the United Steelworkers of America, also known as USW, and educators and staff at the New Children's Museum in San Diego, organized with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, in 2020.
And researchers and other staff at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. Joined the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE, in just a few months ago during 2021. And the folks who make the popular crowdfunding site Kickstarter formed their union with the Office and Professional Employees International Union, also known as OPEIU, in February 2020.
And the writers and producers at MSNBC came together in union and joined with the Writers Guild of America East earlier this year. And then healthcare workers at the East Portland Center for Autism and Related Disorders in Portland, Oregon, joined the American Federation of Teachers, also known as AFT, in May 2019.
So I just want to take a second and note that nearly every union in this country represents a wide diversity of members in lots of different types of jobs, different sectors and industries. The names of specific national or local unions are a reference to their historical roots, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work in a specific occupation or industry in order to join that union, as demonstrated by our earlier examples.
And then I also want to talk a little bit about who is eligible to organize and be in a union. In the private sector, which includes anyone who works for a business, a nonprofit organization, or any other non-governmental entity, they are eligible to organize or join a union as long as they're not a supervisor, a confidential employee, or a managerial employee. This means that as long as you do not have the power to hire or fire other employees, do not work in HR, and do not otherwise have the power to set priorities in the workplace, then you are able to form and join a union. Under current federal labor laws, you have to be a W-2 employee in order to organize, though if you are classified as an independent contractor, but have an ongoing relationship with an employer that decides when and how you perform your work, you may be misclassified, and you can contact the U.S. Department of Labor or a similar agency in your state to file a complaint. And now we're gonna have another poll that's gonna come on your screen. It's related to your rights as at work if you are a non-union employee. So the poll says, which of the following is a guaranteed right that you have as a non-union employee? And you can select as many, you should be able to select as many as you want. And the options are paid vacations, yearly cost of living increases, representation in meetings with HR, access to information about your organization and company's budget, and severance pay during layoffs. So we'll give folks a couple of minutes.
Okay, just give it one more second to get folks to put their votes in last minute. And I'm going to end our poll and share the results. So some mixed results here, some things of what people think is a maybe a guaranteed right, but you may have caught on because actually the answer is none of the above. So if you don't have a union at work, you're not covered by what's known as a collective bargaining agreement. You have none of those above rights. So you're not guaranteed the ability to take potentially any paid vacations or to schedule them when you want. You're not guaranteed annual cost of living increases. You don't have the ability to have a representative join you in investigatory or disciplinary meetings with human resources. You don't have a right to information about your company's budget or finances other than what might otherwise be shared publicly. And your employer is not required to provide severance pay in the event of layoffs. So, you may sort of have different benefits, in your employee handbook or in maybe like an individual employment agreement. But what we mean here is that none of these things are guaranteed and legally enforceable, and your employer can change or eliminate any of your benefits at any time if you don't have a union. So as a non-union employee, there are actually very few rights that you do have that are protected by law, only what's outlined in federal, state, or local laws. Unfortunately, the enforcement mechanisms for those protections that you do have, minimum wage, certain overtime protections. A lot of states and localities now have regulations around paid sick time or even paid family leave. These enforcement mechanisms are often very slow to get justice when there is a wrongdoing, and they're hard to access without a lawyer or other external support. So that's what we mean when we talk about actually having very few rights as a non-union employee.
But there is good news, and that's that over 6 million union members working in professional occupations do have better pay, benefits, and working conditions because they collectively bargain with their employers. By coming together with their coworkers, union members are able to use their collective power to negotiate for concrete, guaranteed advancements in the workplace. They are able to request by right information about their employer to help shape bargaining proposals, and this builds more transparency in the workplace. And by joining together in union, union members are able to speak with a strong, unified voice to advance professional priorities outside of the workplace too.
And when you join a union, you're not just joining with your colleagues in your workplace, but you're also becoming a part of the larger labor movement, which brings with it staff members who have expertise and experience in workplaces like yours and knowledge of how to organize new unions and collective bargaining agreements. And it also comes with the support and solidarity from your fellow union members, whether they're in your union or in another union, in your geographic area or across the country. That support and solidarity comes during what can sometimes be challenging parts of the process. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the examples of gains that professionals in different unions have recently won in their union contracts.
In their first union contract, podcast producers, reporters, and hosts at Gimlet Media won a new salary floor of $73,000 for their most junior employees. And at Ohio State Hospital, nurses and other healthcare professionals won a new contract in 2019 that guaranteed across the board raises of 6.5% over 3 years, plus additional raises for those at the lower end of the pay scale.
And just a few months ago, the reporters and producers who work at National Public Radio won a new contract that included an expansion of their paid parental leave benefit to allow all employees to take up to 20 paid weeks of leave upon the birth or adoption of a child. And elsewhere in media, reporters, editors, and other professionals in the Writers Guild of America East have negotiated contracts at Vox and elsewhere that ends the practice sometimes known as permalancing, where freelancers are strung along on endless short-term contracts, and what they won ultimately creates new permanent positions with benefits for writers at those publications.
And as the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many professionals to start working from home full-time, unionized professionals at organizations such as the National Women's Law Center negotiated with their employer to provide them with stipends and reimbursements to cover new and increased costs. And they also negotiated for additional flexibility in work hours to help employees adapt to the new status quo.
And staffing levels are often a big concern for nurses, other healthcare professionals, for veterinary professionals. But at McLaren Hospital in Lansing, Michigan, nurses were recently able to negotiate for minimum staffing levels in their collective bargaining agreement. That also includes monetary bonuses to be paid to affected staff in the event that the hospital management fails to meet these staffing standards on a particular shift or in a particular unit in the hospital.
And diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a big priority for many professionals, and professionals and unions have used their collective power to negotiate for enforceable commitments to DEI in the workplace. At multiple media outlets, digital journalists have negotiated for ways to increase newsroom diversity, including new standards for recruitment of diverse candidate pools. One example of this is that journalists negotiated for a provision that requires at least 2 folks in underrepresented groups underrepresented in journalism to move on to the interview process during hiring.
And one of my personal favorites is that in many workplaces, professionals have negotiated for student loan repayment assistance programs, such as the $200 a month stipends that the staff of Every Texan, a nonprofit based in Texas, recently won to lessen the burden of student debt on employees who are working on paying off student loans. And these examples that we just shared are really just a few examples of provisions that professionals have negotiated for in their collective bargaining agreements. But when you organize a union, you and your coworkers ultimately decide what your priorities will be in bargaining. Wages and benefits are almost always part of negotiations, but you can also bargain for things such as flexible schedules, additional commitments to racial justice initiatives, changes to the ways that evaluations and promotions work in your workplace, and much, much more. And the great thing about sort of the negotiation process is that once your elected bargaining team reaches a tentative agreement with your organization's management, that contract has to be approved by a majority of colleagues in your union, which guarantees that what your bargaining team agrees to must be acceptable to a majority of your colleagues in your workplace.
And if you want to be part of creating change in your workplace and win similar improvements for you and your coworkers, the best thing you can do is to take the first steps to start organizing a union.
So I know it can be a little intimidating to think about starting the process of organizing a union. There's not that much information online about sort of how to really get started. So we're here to sort of break it down for you a little bit and try to make it as clear as possible. But we also don't want to give you any false impressions. Organizing a union is not a quick process. It's not necessarily a super simple process, But what we're hoping to do is that these first few steps will help you build the strong foundation of an organizing campaign to ensure that your effort is as successful as possible. So the first thing that you should do when thinking about starting an organizing campaign is to reach out to a local or national union, so you can start working with a professional organizer who can be your guide through the process. Every union does things a little bit differently, so it's important to make contact early to make sure that what you're doing makes sense within the context of the union that you're ultimately going to be joining, as well as to make sure that you're dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's from the beginning to make sure that nothing can come up later on that you'll wish you had addressed earlier on. We are going to be sending everybody a survey when this workshop is over, where you can let us know if you're interested in connecting with a union organizer from one of our affiliates. And then over the coming days, we'll work to put folks in touch with organizers to make sure that you can get the ongoing assistance that you want and you need in order to organize your workplace, talk with your coworkers, and ultimately win your union.
And second, you will need to start thinking about everyone who works at your workplace to build a full understanding of who you need to reach out to organize your union. So you'll need to think about which of your coworkers are eligible to join a union, what divisions exist because of department, teams, different titles, roles, and so forth. And then what relationships do you already have and who do you want to start reaching out to first? This is known as mapping the workplace, and it's essential to building an organizing campaign. And then third, you should start having a few initial conversations with coworkers you think would be interested and would do well at moving your union organizing process forward. This team will be known as the Organizing Committee, or OC, and it is important that your committee is representative of your workplace and your coworkers as a whole.
And I really can't emphasize enough how important it is actually to start slowly and give yourself time to plan your organizing campaign and take deliberate action. You're going to be really grateful later on if you take the time now to plan out your campaign and, like I said, really take things step by step. I also want to make sure to emphasize the need to maintain confidentiality in the process and to gradually grow the universe of people who are aware of and are involved in your campaign. Ultimately, you don't want your bosses to find out about your campaign before you want them to find out about it. It is something that, at some point in every campaign, you have to go public. You either want to tell the world about your effort and get folks to support you, and send their solidarity your way. You might have to go public to request recognition of your union or to schedule an election for your union. But it's important that happens on your time frame. So throughout the organizing process, you want to make sure you don't use any platforms that are provided by your employer. You want to, talk with folks on their personal cell phones, personal emails, outside of work hours, outside of your work location, just to be extra careful that you're fully in control, that, the union effort is fully in control of the organizing committee and sort of nothing gets out before you want it to.